The bright lights of the convenience store hurt Hejun's tired eyes. It was nearly midnight in Seoul, and he had just finished another long day at his cybersecurity job. The store's fluorescent lights made everything look harsh and unreal, but he needed some quick dinner before going home. Hejun walked through the quiet aisles, picking up his usual instant ramyeon and a cold drink. His apartment was only a 5-minute walk away, and he looked forward to finally relaxing. At 28 years old, he spent most of his time either at work or sleeping. Tonight was no different. The store was empty except for him and the sleepy cashier, or so he thought. "Excuse me," a soft voice said behind him. "Could you help me reach that top shelf?" Hejun turned around and almost dropped his ramyeon. A young woman stood there, looking up at him with the most unusual eyes he had ever seen. They seemed to change color slightly as she moved, like oil on water. She wore simple clothes, just jeans and a white t-shirt, but something about her made him stare. "Of course," he said, quickly looking away when he realized he was being rude. He reached up and grabbed the packet of cookies he was pointing at. "Thank you," she said, smiling. "I'm Do-yeon." Hejun nodded politely. "Hejun, nice to meet you." He started to turn away, but she spoke again. "You work in cybersecurity, right? At Securinet Korea." He stopped and looked at her carefully. "How did you know that?" Do-yeon's smile never changed. "Oh, I noticed your company ID card in your pocket." Hejun looked down. His ID card was completely hidden in his jacket's inside pocket. A cold feeling crept up his spine, but he tried to stay calm. "I should go," he said. "Wait," Do-yeon said. "Don't you want to know how I really knew?" The fluorescent lights flickered once, twice. When they steadied again, Do-yeon's eyes were definitely changing color now, shifting from brown to purple to something that wasn't quite any color Hejun could name. He backed away slowly. The sleepy cashier hadn't moved or noticed anything strange. In fact, Hejun realized with growing fear, the cashier hadn't moved at all for several minutes. "What did you do?" he asked, his voice steadied despite his racing heart. "I just paused things for a moment," Do-yeon said. "We need to talk, Hejun. You're very special, and I've been looking for someone like you for a long time." Hejun's cybersecurity training kicked in. Rule 1. When something seems wrong, it probably is. Rule 2. Gather information while looking for a way out. "Looking for me? Why?" "Because you're different," she said, stepping closer. "Your mind works in fascinating ways. The way you solve problems, the way you think about security and systems. It's beautiful. I've been watching your work for months." The cold feeling spread through Hejun's whole body. "Months." Do-yeon nodded. "I had to be sure you were the right one. Would you believe me if I said I wasn't from this world?" Hejun looked at the frozen cashier, at Do-yeon's impossible eyes, at the way the air seemed to bend slightly around her. "Yes," he said honestly, "I would believe that." She smiled wider. "Good. That makes things easier. I'm part of a species called the Luminaries. We're very interested in humans like you, Hejun. Smart ones. Special ones." "Why?" he asked again, still inching toward the door. "Because we want to learn from you. Work with you. Maybe even." She paused, her eyes swirling with new colors. "Maybe even be closer than that." Hejun's back hit the door. It wouldn't open. "Let me go," he said firmly. Do-yeon's face showed surprise. "But I haven't even explained everything yet. Don't you want to know about our technology? Our worlds? Everything we could show you?" "No," Hejun said. "I want you to unfreeze that cashier and let me leave." "I've been watching you for months," Do-yeon said again, but her voice had changed. It echoed strangely now, as if coming from very far away. "I chose you carefully. Don't reject me so quickly, human." Hejun's mind raced. If she had really been watching him for months, she would have seen his daily routine. She would know he always bought ramyeon at this store late at night, would know he lived alone, would know nobody would miss him for hours if something happened. He had to think fast. "Okay," he said, forcing himself to relax. "You're right. I'm being rude. Tell me more." Du Yan's smile returned. The door behind He Jun quietly unlocked. "I knew you would understand. You're too curious to turn down knowledge, aren't you? Let me show you something amazing." She held out her hand. In her palm, a small ball of light appeared, floating and spinning. The light cast strange shadows on her face, making her look less and less human. "This is just a tiny example of what we can do," she said. "We have so much to share with humanity. But we have to start small, with individuals we trust. Like you, He Jun." He stared at the light, pretending to be fascinated. "Can you make it bigger?" Du Yan nodded eagerly. As the ball of light grew, He Jun tensed his muscles. The bigger the light got, the more it seemed to drain something from Du Yan. Her eyes flickered, just for a second. That was his chance. He Jun spun around and slammed through the door, running as fast as he could. Behind him, he heard Du Yan call out, but he didn't stop. He ran past his apartment building. He couldn't go there. She knew where he lived, and headed for the busy main street 2 blocks away. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Unknown number. He rejected the call without slowing down. Another buzz. A text message. "Don't be afraid. I only want to help you reach your full potential." He Jun turned off his phone completely. His mind was already working on a plan. He needed somewhere safe to think, somewhere with lots of people around, somewhere with security cameras and witnesses. The all-night internet cafe. He changed direction, cutting through a small park. His heart pounded, but his thinking was clear. He needed to document everything that had just happened. Needed to start researching. Needed to figure out if there were others like him who had been approached by these luminaries. Most importantly, he needed to understand why they were really here. Because one thing his job had taught him was that when someone was too eager to give you something amazing, they usually wanted something even more valuable in return. He Jun slowed to a walk as he approached the brightly lit internet cafe. Through the windows, he could see dozens of people gaming and browsing. Normal, human people. Safe. His phone was still off, but all the screens in the cafe's windows suddenly showed the same message. "Don't reject me, human. You'll understand soon enough." He Jun took a deep breath and pushed open the cafe's door. Whatever was going on, whatever Du Yan and her people really wanted, he would figure it out. That's what he did for a living. Find security problems and solve them. And this, he was starting to realize, might be the biggest security problem Earth had ever faced. He paid for a computer in the back corner, where he could see the whole room and the door. As he sat down, he noticed his hands were shaking slightly. But his mind was sharp, focused. Time to get to work. First, he opened a new document and wrote down everything he could remember about Du Yan. Her exact words, the way she moved, the things she seemed to know. As he typed, he noticed something odd. When he tried to describe her face in detail, he couldn't. It was as if his memories of her exact features were blurry, like a photo slightly out of focus. Next, he started searching news sites and forums for any similar stories. People being approached by strange women, unexplained events in convenience stores, missing persons cases involving cybersecurity experts. Hour after hour passed as He Jun dug deeper. Most of what he found was usual internet nonsense, crazy conspiracy theories, and made-up stories. But a few things caught his attention. A software engineer in Busan who disappeared 3 months ago, leaving behind forum posts about being watched. A network security specialist in Daegu who quit her job suddenly, claiming she had found something bigger. He Jun created a secure email account and started reaching out to people who might know more. He was careful with his words, not mentioning aliens or the luminaries directly, just asking if they had experienced anything strange lately. The sun was rising by the time he finally left the internet cafe. His eyes were tired, but his mind was racing with possibilities and plans. One thing was certain, he couldn't go home. Not yet. As he walked through the early morning streets, looking for a hotel, his turned-off phone suddenly buzzed again. Impossible, but there it was. One new message. Your curiosity is admirable. Hejun. But dangerous. We'll talk again soon. He dropped the phone in the first trash can he passed. It was time to disappear for a while. Time to go completely off the grid until he understood what he was dealing with. Because somewhere out there, Du-yeon was watching, waiting, planning. And Hejun had a feeling this was just the beginning. 3 days had passed since Hejun's strange encounter at the convenience store. He had been staying at a small hotel, paying in cash, and using a fake name. His laptop was new, bought from a busy electronics market where cameras couldn't track him easily. He hadn't contacted anyone from work or family, knowing they might be watched. The hotel room was simple, just a bed, a desk, and a bathroom. But it was on the 10th floor with a good view of the street below. Hejun sat at the desk, staring at his screen. He had found more strange stories online. More people who had disappeared after meeting beautiful strangers. More posts about weird lights and lost time. A knock at the door made him freeze. Room service, a familiar voice called. Du-yeon's voice. Hejun quietly packed his laptop into his bag. The window wasn't an option. 10 floors up was too high. The door handle started to turn slowly. I know you're in there, Hejun, Du-yeon said. Please, just talk to me. I can explain everything. He put his back against the wall next to the door. How did you find me? We can always find those we're interested in, she said. Her voice seemed to come from inside his head now. But I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here to show you the truth. The door opened. Du-yeon walked in, looking exactly as she had in the convenience store. But this time, Hejun was ready. He had spent 3 days preparing. Stop, he said firmly, holding up his phone. I'm live streaming right now to 50 different servers. If anything happens to me, thousands of people will see it. Du-yeon smiled. No, you're not. We control all signals in and out of this building right now. But I like that you tried. You're always thinking, always planning. That's why you're perfect. She sat down on the bed, looking completely relaxed. Her eyes swirled with those impossible colors again. Let me show you who I really am, she said. The air around her began to shine and bend. Her form shifted, like water flowing into a new shape. Hejun watched, unable to look away, as Du-yeon changed. Her skin became slightly transparent, showing soft light moving underneath. Her hair floated as if she was underwater. Her eyes grew larger, filled with stars. This is closer to my true form, she said. Her voice was different now, deeper, richer, full of strange echoes. Though not completely. Your human mind couldn't handle seeing me as I truly am. Hejun forced himself to think clearly. Why me? Because you understand systems, she said. You see patterns others miss. You know how to find hidden things and protect valuable secrets. These are qualities we value highly. She stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the busy Seoul traffic had stopped. All the cars were frozen in place, just like the convenience store cashier had been. We've been watching Earth for a long time, Du-yeon continued. Humans are interesting. You're primitive in many ways, but you have such potential, such creativity. We want to help you grow. By stalking people and making them disappear. Hejun asked. Du-yeon turned back to him. Disappear? No, those people joined us willingly. They saw what we could offer and accepted our gift. What gift? She held out her hand. Above it, the air split open like a zipper, showing a view of another world. Hejun saw impossible buildings made of crystal and light, strange creatures floating through purple skies, technology that seemed to break all the rules he knew. We can give you knowledge, Du-yeon said. Power, a place among beings far greater than humans, All you have to do is accept me. Hejun looked at the alien world floating above her hand. It was beautiful and terrifying. Accept you how? Let me into your mind, she said. Let me share myself with you. We could be together, learning from each other, growing stronger. You would keep your memories, your personality, but you would be so much more. Warning bells rang in Hejun's mind. Share yourself with me. You mean take over my body? No, no, Du Yen said quickly. It's more like a marriage, a joining. We would share everything, thoughts, feelings, powers. You would still be you, just better. Hejun noticed something important. Every time Du Yen said, you would still be you, her left hand twitched slightly. A tell, something he was trained to look for in his work, a sign of lying. Can I think about it? He asked, pretending to be interested. Du Yen's face lit up. Of course. Take all the time you need. But please, let me show you more. Let me prove what we can offer. She waved her hand, and the hotel room changed. They were standing in space, stars all around them. Hejun felt no fear, no lack of air. It was like being in a dream. We can take you anywhere, Du Yen said. Show you anything. The beginning of time, the end of the universe. All the knowledge of 1,000,000 worlds could be yours. The space around them changed again. Now they were in what looked like a giant library, but the books were made of light. Every question you've ever had could be answered, Du Yen said. Every mystery solved. Another change. They were back in the hotel room, but Hejun could suddenly see all the digital signals flowing through the air. Wi-Fi, phone signals, radio waves, everything. It was beautiful and overwhelming. You could understand it all, Du Yen whispered. Master it all. Never be limited by human technology again. Hejun's head was spinning with all he had seen, but one detail kept bothering him. One tiny thing that didn't fit. Can I see that library again? He asked. Du Yen smiled and raised her hand. But before she could change their surroundings, Hejun saw it again, that small twitch in her left hand. The tell. Wait, he said. First, tell me about the others who joined you, the ones who disappeared. Can I meet them? Another twitch. They're busy right now. Learning, growing. But soon. You're lying, Hejun said quietly. About everything. The room temperature dropped suddenly. Du Yen's eyes flashed. What makes you say that? Because you have a tell when you lie, he said. And because none of this makes sense. If you're so advanced, why do you need human bodies? If you want to help us grow, why approach people in secret? Why not go to our governments, our scientists? Politics is complicated, Du Yen started. No, Hejun cut her off. The truth is complicated. Lies are usually simple. And your story is very simple. Du Yen's form flickered, like a bad TV signal. For just a second, Hejun saw something else standing there. Something that wasn't beautiful at all. Don't reject me, human, Du Yen said, but her voice had changed again. It was cold now, angry. You don't understand what you're turning down. I understand enough, Hejun said. I understand that you're not here to help us, and I understand that those people who disappeared didn't go willingly. The air in the room felt heavy, like before a storm. Du Yen's shape kept flickering, struggling to stay stable. You're too smart for your own good, she said. But it doesn't matter. You'll understand soon enough, one way or another. She walked toward him, her form shifting faster now, showing flashes of something horrible underneath the beautiful surface. But Hejun didn't back away. Instead, he smiled. One more thing I understand, he said. I understand that this whole time, you've been downloading everything from my new laptop, trying to learn about me. But what you don't know is that while you were showing me pretty light shows, I was uploading a virus I wrote into whatever system you're using to control all these signals. Du Yen stopped. You're bluffing. Check your network. She did. Her eyes widened. What? What did you do? Like you said, I understand systems. Even alien ones have patterns. And while you were busy lying to me, I was busy finding those patterns, learning them, breaking them. The room's lights flickered wildly. Outside, the frozen traffic suddenly started moving again. Du Yin's form became more unstable with each passing second. This isn't over, she said, her voice distorting. We'll find you again. We'll. She vanished in a flash of light, leaving He Jun alone in the hotel room. His laptop beeped, showing that the upload was complete. He had no idea if his virus would actually work on alien technology, but it had done its real job, making Du Yan panic and retreat. He Jun sat down heavily on the bed, his hands shaking. He had learned a lot in the past hour. Too much, maybe. But one thing was clear. Earth was in danger, and almost nobody knew it. He opened his laptop and started typing quickly. It was time to tell someone who could help. Time to find others who might have noticed what he had noticed. Time to fight back. Because now he knew the truth. The Luminaries weren't here to help humanity grow. They were here to take over, one person at a time. And He Jun had just declared war on them. He Jun hadn't slept properly in 5 days. After his confrontation with Du Yan, he had moved to a different hotel, then another, never staying more than one night in the same place. His laptop screen glowed in the darkness as he worked, connecting pieces of a puzzle that became more frightening with each new discovery. He wasn't alone anymore. His old colleague from SecureNet Korea, Ji-ho Kim, sat across from him in the small hotel room, looking through files on his own computer. Ji-ho had been the only person He Jun trusted enough to contact after everything that had happened. Look at this, Ji-ho said, turning his screen around. Another case from last month, a computer engineer in Incheon. His family said he started acting strange after meeting someone at a coffee shop. Then one day, he just disappeared. He Jun rubbed his tired eyes. Add it to the map. On Ji-ho's screen, a map of South Korea showed dozens of red dots. Each dot represented someone who had disappeared after describing experiences similar to He Jun's. The dots made a pattern that neither of them wanted to think about too much. It's like a web, Ji-ho said quietly. They're spreading out from certain points, building a network. He Jun nodded. And look at who they're targeting. It's specialists, security experts, people who understand networks and systems, people who could help them understand our technology, Ji-ho added, or help them hide their activities. He Jun stood up and walked to the window. The city lights of Seoul spread out below them, beautiful and peaceful. How many of those lights hid something that wasn't human anymore? I think I found something in that code you got from them, Ji-ho said. When your virus uploaded into their network, it brought back some data. Most of it is encrypted, but I managed to decode a small piece. He Jun turned back to him. What did you find? It's not good. Ji-ho's hands shook slightly as he typed. The file I decoded seems to be some kind of progress report. It talks about successful integrations and host retention rates. A cold feeling spread through He Jun's stomach. Show me. The decoded text appeared on screen. As they read through it, the true horror of what the Luminaries were doing became clear. They're not just taking over bodies, He Jun said, his voice barely a whisper. They're using our memories, our knowledge, to perfect their disguise. Each person they take teaches them more about how to fool the next one. Ji-ho nodded grimly. And look at this part, about their real form. The report described the Luminaries in clinical, emotionless terms. They weren't beautiful creatures of light like Du Yan had appeared to be. They were parasites, spreading through the galaxy by taking over other species. Their natural form was something that human minds could barely comprehend. A mix of energy and matter that needed host bodies to survive in most environments. The female forms they use, Ji-ho said, pointing at another section. It's a tactic. Their research showed that male targets were more likely to trust and be attracted to female strangers. Du Yun, He-jun muttered. The whole time, I was probably talking to a male luminaris using a female appearance to manipulate me. They worked through the night, decoding more files. Each new piece of information painted a darker picture. The luminaris had been on Earth for years, slowly building their numbers. They chose their targets carefully. People with useful skills who wouldn't be missed immediately. People who worked with computers and technology, who often lived alone and worked late hours. Around 3 in the morning, Jae-ho found something that made him curse out loud. "What is it?" He-jun asked, walking over to his friend's computer. "I just decoded their communication protocols." He-jun, "They're not working alone. They have human helpers, people in important positions who are helping them in exchange for promises of power or immortality." He-jun felt sick. Traitors. "Look at these names." Jae-ho scrolled through a list. Government officials, corporate executives, people who can help cover up disappearances or give them access to secure facilities. A phone rang, making them both jump. It was Jae-ho's mobile. "Unknown number," he said, showing He-jun the screen. "Don't answer it." But before Jae-ho could decline the call, the phone answered itself. A familiar voice filled the room. "Hello, He-jun," Du Yun said. "And hello, Jae-ho. You've been very busy, haven't you?" He-jun grabbed the phone. "How did you track you?" Du Yun laughed. "Did you really think your little virus could harm our network? We let you see exactly what we wanted you to see. And now you've led us to someone else with valuable skills." Jae-ho's laptop screen went black. Then words began appearing. "Don't read GKTUS, humans. You will only make this harder." "You're too late," He-jun said into the phone. "We've already sent everything we found to others. If anything happens to us, the truth gets out." "No, you haven't," Du Yun said calmly. "Because we control more of your networks than you realize. Every email you tried to send, every file you tried to upload, we caught them all. You have no idea how deep our influence goes." The hotel room's lights began to flicker. He-jun looked at Jae-ho, who was typing frantically on his laptop. "But we're willing to be generous," Du Yun continued. "Join us willingly. Both of you. You've proven how clever you are. We could use minds like yours." Jae-ho's laptop suddenly showed a video feed. It showed He-jun's parents' house. Then Jae-ho's sister's apartment. "Your families could join too," Du Yun said. "We could keep them safe in the coming changes. Because change is coming, whether you help us or not." He-jun's mind raced. They needed a way out, a way to fight back. He looked at Jae-ho, who was holding up his phone's screen. He had typed out a message. "The backup plan. Now." He-jun nodded slightly. While Du Yun kept talking, Jae-ho pressed a button on his phone. Suddenly, every screen in the room went dark. The phone call ended. Even the hotel's lights went out. 3 minutes, Jae-ho said, grabbing his bag. "That's how long the electromagnetic pulse will last. We need to move." They had prepared for this, buying old non-electronic equipment that wouldn't be affected by the EMP. He-jun grabbed his backup bag, which contained paper maps, cash, and basic supplies. "Where are we going?" Jae-ho asked as they hurried down the emergency stairs. "There's one person who might be able to help us," He-jun said. "Someone who's been investigating strange disappearances for years. I found her blog while doing research, but I couldn't risk contacting her electronically." "Who?" "A reporter named My Sun Lee. She's been writing about missing tech workers for 2 years. Everyone thinks she's crazy, seeing conspiracies everywhere. But she's not crazy. She's been right all along." They reached the street just as lights started coming back on around the city. The EMP had only affected a small area, but it had given them a chance to disappear. "How do we find her?" Jae-ho asked as they walked quickly through the dark streets. "She writes for a small newspaper in Daegu," He-jun said. We need to get there before the Luminaries realize where we're going. And we need to figure out a way to fight back that doesn't rely on modern technology. How do we do that? Hajun thought about everything they had learned. About the Luminaries' weaknesses, their dependence on electronic networks, their need for human hosts. We go old school, he said. Paper, face-to-face meetings, no phones, no computers. We find others who know the truth, and we build a resistance. Because there's one thing I learned from that decoded file that gives us hope. What's that? The Luminaries can only take over willing hosts. That's why they spend so much time manipulating people, making them want to accept the gift. They physically cannot take over someone who refuses them completely. Jai-Ho's eyes widened. So if we can warn people, if we can make people understand what's really happening, the Luminaries can't spread. They need humanity's cooperation to invade. Without it, they're just parasites with no hosts. As they walked through the sleeping city, Hajun felt something he hadn't felt in days. Hope. The Luminaries were powerful, but they weren't invincible. They could be fought. They could be stopped. But first, they had to find my son Lee. And they had to hope she was still human. The small newspaper office in Daegu looked empty when Hajun and Jai-Ho arrived. It was early morning, the sun barely rising over the city. They had traveled all night, taking back roads and avoiding security cameras. Both men were tired, but they couldn't rest yet. Are you sure about this? Jai-Ho asked, looking at the dark windows of the newspaper building. Hajun nodded. My son Lee's articles are the only ones that came close to the truth. She wrote about people changing after strange meetings, about weird lights and missing time. Everyone thought she was writing fiction, but she was documenting real cases. They walked to the back door. Hajun had learned from his research that my son always came to work early, usually around 5 in the morning. It was nearly that time now. A light turned on inside the building. Through the window, they saw a woman in her 30s walking between the desks, carrying a cup of coffee. She moved carefully, checking her surroundings as she walked. The habits of someone who knew she was being watched. Hajun knocked on the glass door. My son jumped, spilling some of her coffee. When she saw them, her eyes widened with recognition. You're Hajun Park, she said through the door. From Securinet, Korea. You disappeared last week. We need your help, Hajun said. And we can help you too. We know what you've been investigating is real. My son studied them for a long moment. Then she pulled a small device from her pocket and held it up to the glass. It looked like an old radio with blinking lights. Electronic field detector, she explained. Checks for unusual energy signatures. The Luminaries can't hide them completely. Hajun and Jai-Ho looked at each other in surprise. My son knew even more than they had hoped. She opened the door. Come in quickly. We don't have much time. Inside her office, my son pulled out a large paper map covered in notes and strings connecting different locations. It looked similar to the digital map Hajun and Jai-Ho had made, but with 2 years' worth of additional data. I've been tracking them since they took my brother, my son said. He was a software developer. One day he started talking about a beautiful woman he'd met, about amazing opportunities. A week later, he wasn't my brother anymore. Something else was living in his body. She showed them her research, papers filled with witness accounts, photographs of strange lights, lists of missing people, everything carefully documented on paper, nothing stored digitally. I learned early on that they could access anything electronic, she explained. So I went old school. Paper records, Polaroid cameras, analog devices only. We need to get this information out, Hajun said. People need to know what's happening. My son shook her head. I've tried. They control too many people in positions of power. Any story I write gets blocked. Any evidence I collect disappears. They're too strong now. No, Jai-Ho said firmly. They're not strong. They're desperate. Think about it. Why do they spend so much time trying to convince people to join them? Why not just take over by force? Hejun understood what Jaiho was saying. Because they can't. They need willing hosts. That's their weakness. My son looked at her map thoughtfully. That's true. My brother, before he changed, they spent weeks working on him, convincing him. Even when he was ready, something still went wrong. What do you mean? Hejun asked. The change wasn't complete. Sometimes I still see flashes of my real brother in his eyes, like he's fighting them from inside. That's why they prefer to take people who are alone, who won't be watched closely by family. The host's will can resist them if it's strong enough. Hejun walked to the map. So we have 3 advantages. 1, they can't take unwilling hosts. 2, the hosts can fight back from inside. And 3, he pointed to the strings connecting different locations. They need their network. They're connected to each other somehow. Jaiho opened his bag and pulled out the papers they had printed before leaving Seoul. The files we decoded mentioned something about a central hub, a place where their consciousness is anchored to Earth. My son's eyes lit up. The tower, she whispered. There's a new telecommunications tower that was built last year. My brother's company helped design it. Look. She pointed to her map. All the strings seemed to lead back to one central point. If we could destroy it, Hejun started. We can't. My son interrupted. It's too heavily guarded. And even if we got close, they would sense us coming. Unless, Jaiho said slowly, we had help from the inside. They all looked at each other as the idea took shape. Your brother, Hejun said to my son. You said he's still fighting them. Are there others like him? Hosts who haven't completely given in? My son nodded. I've met a few. They can't act openly against the luminaries, but sometimes they find ways to help me. Small things, warnings, information. Then we don't need to destroy the tower, Hejun said. We just need to get a message into their network, something that will reach all the hosts at once. Remind them they can fight back. A virus, Jaiho said excitedly. Not a computer virus, a message of resistance. If enough hosts fight back at the same time, the network would collapse. My son finished. But how do we send a message through their system? They control all electronic communications. Hejun smiled for the first time in days. We don't use their system. We use yours. He pointed to her old radio equipment. Analog signals. Simple ones, like the emergency broadcast system. If we can hijack that for just a few minutes. They worked through the day, planning carefully. My son contacted other hosts who were fighting back. Jaiho modified old radio equipment. Hejun wrote the message they would send. Simple words that would reach into the minds of everyone the luminaries had taken. You are not alone. You can fight back. Your will is stronger than their control. Remember who you are. As the sun set, they were ready. My son's resistance contacts were in position around the city. The modified radio equipment was set up. Everything depended on the next few minutes. They're coming, my son said, looking out the window. Strange lights were moving through the streets toward the newspaper office. Hejun saw a familiar figure leading them. Du-yeon, still wearing the same beautiful human form, but now he could see the wrongness beneath it clearly. Don't reject us, humans. Du-yeon's voice echoed through the building. You've caused enough trouble. Accept the inevitable. Now, Hejun said. Jaiho pressed the button. Their message went out on every frequency, broadcasting through the old emergency system. Simple words, repeated over and over. The effect was immediate. The lights outside flickered and wavered. Du-yeon's form became unstable, shifting between shapes. All around the city, people who had been taken by the luminaries began to remember who they were. No, Du-yeon's voice was distorted, desperate. Stop this. You don't understand what you're doing. But it was too late. The network was collapsing as hundreds of hosts fought back at once. The beautiful illusions the luminaries had created fell away, revealing their true, horrifying forms. My son's brother burst into the office, his eyes clear for the first time in months. "The tower," he gasped. "It's failing. They're losing control." Through the window, they watched as the telecommunications tower that had been the luminous anchor began to pulse with strange light. The aliens' true forms were being pulled toward it, drawn back to their entry point as their network collapsed. "This isn't over," Du Yin's voice said one last time, now completely inhuman. "We will return." "No," He Jun said firmly. "Humanity knows the truth now. We know what you really are, and we will never stop fighting you." The tower flared with blinding light. When it faded, the luminaries were gone. All around the city, their former hosts were waking up, confused but free. Hours later, He Jun sat in my son's office, watching the sun rise on a changed world. The news was full of stories about what had happened. Some people tried to deny it, to explain it away. But too many had seen the truth now. "What do we do next?" Jai-Ho asked, looking tired but happy. "We get ready," He Jun said. "They'll try again somewhere else. Other aliens might try too. But now we know our strength." He looked at the message they had broadcast, still displayed on my son's old computer screen. "You are not alone. You can fight back. Your will is stronger than their control. Remember who you are." Simple words that had saved humanity, because in the end, that was humanity's greatest strength. Not technology, not weapons, but the power of the human spirit to resist, to fight back, to remain free. The luminaries had chosen the wrong species to invade. They had thought humans would be easy to control, easy to deceive. Instead, they had learned a hard lesson. Never underestimate the power of human will, and never, ever try to force a human to reject their own humanity.